Let's open the meeting of the West Newbury Board of Selectmen, Monday, June 15th. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and the internet. Meeting is also accessible by remote participation. The go-to meeting access code is 350-521-085. Again, please subscribe to the town announcements, westnewbury.org /subscribe. Our first order of business, with all that's been going on in the United States and in the world recently, we thought it would be worthwhile to just briefly have the chief of police discuss the protocols for use of force by the police department. We intend this to just be strictly informational. Jeff will go over and not long. Jeff will just go over things, and I think we can all learn from this. And if people feel that it's they would like to comment on that, we can I think do that at another time. We just added this at the last minute at the last meeting, so we're not prepared to get into a big discussion about this right at the moment. But we felt it was important enough to add it on a meeting that was already an emergency meeting to add this to it. So without further ado, I'd like Police Chief Duran to just briefly go over the written policy and give us his thoughts. So without further ado, thank you, Jeff.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Obviously, this has been a situation in the United States that's has a lot of attention drawn to it. I'd like to go over some of the department's policies. We are, first of all, an accredited department, state accredited. So all of our policies and procedures that we use on the department have been gone through with a fine-tooth comb, scrutinized, and their best practices. And any accredited or certified police department uses very similar policies. That being said, we train firearms twice a year, and during that training, we also cover our use of force policy. During defensive tactics, which we train once a year, we also again go over our use of force policy. The major thing that the officers are trained is to de-escalate situations. We don't want to have to use force. That's not what what our goal is. Our goal is, if we have to make an arrest, be able to do so without any issues. All the officers on the department are familiar with and sign off on the policies. We have very few use of force reports yearly on the department. Just as an example of some use of force, we've had intoxicated individual attempted to jump off the Rocks Village Bridge. The officers had to go hands-on with that individual to prevent that. That was something that was reported as a use of force. We've had one taser deployment, and since we've had the tasers, we've had one pepper spray deployment in the last 10 years. Almost all of our arrests aren't an issue. Again, the officers are all trained multiple times yearly on de-escalating situations and having people become compliant with an arrest situation. I know Angus has given all of you copies of the policies and procedures. Does anyone have a specific question on any of the policies?
Archie, I see your lips moving, but you're on mute.
I hang on. I did have a question, and I marked it on the thing, but I've got to find it. While I'm looking for the other one, Jeff, I have a question in terms of when reading this, I didn't get a clear feeling for, in other words, if an officer is by themselves and they what is the situation in terms, in other words, instead of escalating the force, but to just wait for assistance of another officer? How does that sort of play out?
Well, in situations where an officer is possibly working alone or at a call first and is alone without a backup officer, obviously if the circumstances dictate and the officer can de-escalate and wait for backup, that's the plan. We wouldn't want an officer, using any more force than necessary just because they are alone.
Right.
There have been situations, I think, in the past, and we're talking about maybe a while ago, even something that you were involved with, Jeff, that you made sure that it was a situation where you felt that you needed backup, and then you made sure everybody was safe at the scene and everybody was secure, but you waited for that backup then to be able to proceed with the arrest because you understood the circumstances and you might need other people. And those are the type of things you still carry on with this, this present police force?
Yep. The officers are trained, like I said, to de-escalate, try to control the situation, request backup if they think they need it. And if it's possible to wait for the backup to arrive, then that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. Something, Archie, can I ask another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Something you mentioned earlier about going over the procedures and stuff. Are the officers required to obviously go over our procedures and then sign it so they understand it? How does that work?
Yeah, as we were going through the accreditation process, as policies and procedures were coming out that the department adopted, all the officers are required to read and sign off on each individual policy that they understand it.
Okay.
Glenn, do you have another question or?
No, I just wanted to clarify to make sure that, if we have those policies and procedures, I know they were trained in them. I heard Chief at least trained again and reviewed 3 times a year, but I just wanted to make sure that there was a process involved that, there's some ownership of them by signing them. That's it. I got it.
Go ahead, Rick. I'll go ahead. I'll wait.
Oh, sorry, Archie. Didn't mean to cut you off. Are the policies, the information that you provided to Angus, who in turn provided them to us, are they available for public review?
Yes, they are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff, this is the question that I really want to ask. So after the incident report is prepared and works its way up towards you, and you look it over and sort of, then what happens? Are you either satisfied with it, or is it given a, like, this is sort of okay or this is not okay? Sort of what happens after the review gets to you? What do you do with it?
Okay, if there's been a use of force, the officers are required to file a separate use of force report, and those are investigated by Sergeant Cena at this time. It used to be my job when I was a sergeant. We go over the incident, make sure the policies were followed, and the officers understand the policies. Those are all tracked yearly, any reports that we do take, and like I said, it's been very few. I do have a summary of use of force for the years 2017, 2018, and 2019. that's available if anybody would like to have a copy of that. One change in our use of force policy, we used to report if the officers had to shoot an animal that was hit by a car, something like that. We don't report those anymore as use of force. So for those 3 years, the numbers are, skewed. But on average, it looks like there was 3 incidents a year where it was a use of force. And like I said, for a majority of them, it's only been a hands-on situation. There's only been 1 pepper spray and 1 taser deployment. Nothing more serious than those.
And if I'm not mistaken, on that taser incident, that was a person that got pulled over for DWI and got my memory serves me correct, and got very, very argumentative. He was on 113. It was a gentleman, and there were cars going by. He threatened police officers. He had his fist, and they tried everything they possibly could to de-escalate that situation. And they felt, that tasing him just to try to be able to subdue him because he was just kind of out of control, and on 113 with cars going by, even to try to protect his own life by not getting hit. That's when they made a determination that they should do that, and then everything came into play. Everything came in, and he was being able to subdued, and then being able to be processed through the proper channels.
That's correct. That particular party was very combative with the police.
Actually, I'm going to piggyback on your question. So you asked about what the procedure was on that. So in the so about the report. So there is a separate report, Chief, that we make up with use of force, and then Sergeant Cena now follows through to make sure everything was properly done. So then
That's
I guess
correct.
the question would be, the question I guess out there is then, what happens if it was found that one of our officers didn't do the right? This is just totally hypothetical. What happens if we find out that if the officers didn't do it properly through Sergeant Cena's investigation? What do we have in place to be able to retrain those officers, or what happens then? Because I don't know.
Well, if there was a use of force that wasn't within our policy, then we'd have another situation. It could be as simple as a retraining. It could involve something more serious with the officer, such as some type of discipline. It would depend on the specifics of the situation.
But you do have things in that question just lent itself to another question of like what happens on the other end. You know what I mean? So, okay, so you do have policies and procedures in place that if we didn't follow that, but we have
that's why those use of force reports are reviewed to make sure things were done correctly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Archie. I'm done.
Jeff, if somebody did, I actually have had somebody ask me about the availability of the policies. Should they go to you, or do you want to pass them on to the manager's office and have them go through the town manager's office?
They can contact me directly, either by phone call or email, and I'll get them a copy of what they want.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff, you mentioned something about this year's training for the officers will be a little more focused on de-escalation. You want to just expound on that just a tiny bit more?
Well, as part of the training this year, we're going to have a class specific to de-escalation. Prior, the de-escalation has been worked into the different trainings, but this is going to be a class specific to that one topic.
Who gives that training?
Well, the department will give the training, but almost all of the training that the department gives to the officers is reviewed and usually put out by the Mass Training Council. They'll give out a syllabus or the training information to the training officers, and every department gets the same information. So it's not something that's really homemade in West Newbury. It's put out by the Mass Police Training Committee.
Rick or Glenn, any further comments?
Yeah,
Glenn?
just one more. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me? I'm
yes.
sorry. And I was told, well, I heard, Chief, that there's specifically the evaluations in the world that they're going to specifically really stress on de-escalation. This training is very time sensitive, I guess. You know what I mean? It's just not looking through the training manuals again and going over the same stuff you guys were doing forever. This is, they are really taking into effect what's going on in the world and maybe changing some techniques or some good ideas to try to help the situations that are happening, rather, right?
That's correct. You were kind of broken up, Glenn, but I'm sure that a lot of the trainings
I'm sorry.
coming out.
Life, horrible.
Well, I'm sure a lot of the trainings coming out are going to be reflective of what's going on in the whole country. I think, you know, the face of policing as we know it is changing and evolving quickly. And so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of new information and new trainings put out.
Well, I'm satisfied,
Jeff,
and I'm happy that these are all public information and people can get them. So I have no other question.
Yeah, Jeff, in the current policies, I read through them and I don't recall seeing this specifically, but you know, you know, I just want to preface this by saying that you know, I'm impressed with the professionalism and, you know, everything I've seen about our police department. I have no issues, but I'm just trying to kind of address the realities of the world. Is there anything in the existing policies that prohibits the use of, say, you know, chokeholds or things like that? I don't recall seeing that mentioned specifically. So just a question.
Nothing specific, but we never train chokeholds ever.
Okay.
And that, you know, we stay away from people's necks and the head. You know, we never, I don't think any department trains for chokeholds in this area.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they did, but I just had to ask the question. Sorry, felt I had to ask the question.
Nope, we're trained the opposite. Stay away from people's necks. You know, and in our policy, any use of force, the first thing that happens after is if we find out if they need any medical assistance.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good question. That's a good question, because people see other things and they just kind of generic thing that police do, you know, all things all the same. No, that's a great question. And I'm glad that we don't.
I think the officers in town here, the 25 years I've been here, there's never been anyone that wants to come to work and go out and hurt anybody. I don't know of anybody in the area departments. You know, everybody's has their head on straight. They're trying to do their job the best they can. Once in a while, we'll run into a bad actor. We do our job professionally and we follow the rules and policies.
Any further comments, Rick, or you good?
No, I'm good for now. Well, you know, I'm guessing, you know, we might get a couple of questions back from people from the outside, and you know, then we can take those up when and if they come. But that's great, Jeff.
Do you have Jeff? Do you have any problems with I think Rick's thing about people having questions, especially this time, is a good one. Do you have anybody just can you call?
You at the beach? Glenn?
No, I'm on my back deck.
No, I don't have any questions or problems.
You know what I mean? That might be a way to go, Rick, too. If anybody contacts you, tell them to call the chief directly and go over everything with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Not a problem. either go through Rick, contact me, go through the other board members. It's not an issue.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Have a wonderful night.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, Jeff. And anybody that wants a copy of the quite detailed manual on this, just request it. It's available.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Okay,
Okay.
Request it through Jeff. You just asked for it, Archie. I just said it might be easier just to keep some bandwidth out of our office, and if they need it, Jeff has it and he can send it up to them.
Right. Okay. The next item is just a review of our comment that the town is going to send about the eligibility application about the 40B on Coffin and Main Street. Angus will give us just a brief synopsis of what we're actually going to send, and then we can take a quick look of the main cover letter that the town will be sending, along with the comments that the boards and committees and residents have sent in. And I believe we've gotten over a couple hundred comments from people. And so we don't know how Mass Housing will look at these things, but we're going to try and put the most important things in our letters. And also, are they going to read all 200 comments? I don't know, but we're going to send them anyway. So, Angus?
Sure. So the board has in front of you a transmittal letter, which at present is a 7-page transmittal that hits on a number of the high points of concerns that the board has, many of which are also reflected in some of the more than 200 letters that were received from West Newbury residents. We even received at least one letter from someone out of town who was not favorable to the proposal. And the board also received letters, very thoughtful and substantive letters from a number of town departments, boards, commissions, and committees. And so the intent all along is that the board's letter, while substantive in and of itself, is also serving as a transmittal letter of many other comments. So an overall package would be sent to Mass Housing on behalf of the town. So the draft letter in front of the board is organized into 4 sections. There's comments offered regarding the process, then additional comments regarding the board's substantive review of the proposal. The letter highlights the primary concerns, certainly not the sole concerns, but the primary issues that the board wanted to highlight, and then finally finishes with some requests and recommendations. So I don't know, Archie, if that's sufficient. I will just say that there are many comments that have come in, and many of which the board members share the concerns, but that are not addressed in great detail in this letter because based on our understanding of the process with Mass Housing, we've tried to focus our comments on those issues that are going to be most salient to Mass Housing in their review of the application for project eligibility and site approval that is pending before Mass Housing. There's certain issues that rise to a level that we feel those are highly relevant to Mass Housing at this stage. There are other issues that are closer to the ground, if you will, that are certainly very important to the town, but that we know from experience and from direction we've received from Mass Housing, in their view, are more appropriate to address in a local permitting process.
And could you give us some examples of that? Because I know that you and Rick were on a phone call that they kind of outlined all that stuff that might be helpful for us and maybe anybody who's listening?
Sure. A couple of examples, and Rick could certainly elaborate, but one example is the issue of school capacity is simply a non-issue. That's not something that Mass Housing is concerned about at all. And I think if we did include concerns like that, it kind of, I think it's better to keep the letter focused on the issues that are going to be at least potentially received on the other end.
Yeah, I think it would water down the message of that they consider of substance to include things that they don't consider to be of substance.
Right. And when I say that, this isn't just a matter of, the current people who happen to be in that agency. This is in some cases, a matter of years, or if not a decade or more, of case law that in some instances has established very clearly that certain issues are kind of out of bounds in the 40B process in terms of a basis for local disapproval. Doesn't mean the town needs to ignore these issues or that the town is ignoring these issues. What it means is that we need to choose our opportunity to address them. And so, another example of that would be the issue of the lack of sidewalks, for instance, between the site and the town center. That can certainly be stated and is stated in terms of making the case that or illustrating the case, I should say, that the site is not in any way, a pedestrian-oriented site, and that representations to the contrary are really not correct. That's fine to say, but the Mass Housing is not going to require the developer, for instance, put a sidewalk between the site and the town center. That's just not going to happen. So the letter is the board's letter is intended to be focused, but then it would attach, hundreds of pages of additional comments. So all of that would be provided to Mass Housing.
Angus, why don't we,
Thank you, Angus. Those are
in the interest of time and everything else, I think it would be worthwhile that if we inform people that are listening right at the moment that let's go with our three, our primary concerns. I think it's worthwhile to people to hear that at the moment, these are the things that will be pertinent to what Mass Housing is interested in at the moment, would have an effect on them, and what we have labeled our primary concern. So I think that's worthwhile for us to at least delineate for people. So the first item is that we have labeled one of our primary concerns is the large project threshold. So a project can be disqualified if it is going to create more units because of the size of our town. It depends on town size, but if it's creating more than 6% of the existing housing units, and interestingly, because the census is taking place in 2020, but it isn't finished yet, the number that's actually would be used is the number of housing units in West Newbury as of the 2010 census, because the 2021 isn't complete at the moment. So that actually would actually lower the threshold. So if we are using the number of 1,558 as the housing units present in West Newbury in 2010, 6% of that is 93 units. And so this particular project is over that threshold by 63% as it presently being applied for. So that is a strong a factor in being a disqualification for a project of this size. Why would it's possible that in some town that some project would want to have more than the allowed, so that it's not that it's immediately a disqualifier, because there might be situations where a municipality would want more than the threshold number. But in this case, we're feeling this is a big issue. So that's the first one.
Okay, can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, just so, because the next question, if somebody's listening, we have 15 people, but including us, so we probably have like 10 people on here. So Angus or Mike, so in my mind, or anybody, a layman that's listening, would say, well, if by law they can't have any more than 93, which is, that's a non-starter. So this is over, is how, you know what I mean? So how true is that? You know what I mean? How stringent do they go by their own laws and policies? So, you know what I mean? But so if I was listening saying, okay, they can't do it, it's a large thing, it's a town, we have, just say we have 1,600, they can't have the 6% of that, so it's a non-starter, so it's all over with. I mean, do we hang our hat on that, or how realistic is that? Or there are ways to get around it, or are there, you know what I mean by that? I don't know. So
Let Angus answer.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll take a crack at it, and Mike, if you want to supplement what I say, that's fine too. It is absolute. It's very clear in the regulations and in our consultation with both our in-house counsel and our outside counsel. It's very clear. The 40B regulations establish this large project threshold. And what it means is that if an application comes in above that threshold, it means that the Board of Appeals may use that as a basis to deny the project, and that denial would not have the avenue of appeal that it otherwise would. It does not mean that an applicant cannot apply above that threshold. So it doesn't mean that they can't propose it at that level. In the board's draft letter to Mass Housing, it does take the step of urging that Mass Housing not issue the project eligibility site approval letter, in part for that reason. And perhaps that's how it will go. If you look at the track record of these things, there's certainly a chance that Mass Housing would issue a project eligibility site approval letter, despite the fact that the proposal is so far above the large project threshold. But it's you know, I think one of the stronger points we've made here is the developer has represented a number of times that the proposed unit count is what he feels is needed to make the development of the site economically feasible. That would seem to be squarely at odds with the restriction within 40B that the conditions of approval can't render a project uneconomic. What the applicant himself is representing is that the proposal that he's brought forward is necessary for it to be economic, and yet it's way above the threshold. So it would appear, as you said, Glenn, it would appear that this is not a viable proposal. But that doesn't mean Mass Housing can't issue their letter, and it doesn't mean the applicant can't bring forward an application.
Good. Thank you very much. I think that was extremely helpful, especially when you expounded into the part of the Board of Appeals, of that when it gets to them and them denying it, then there is no appeal process because they did not meet, you know, or they went over that threshold. Very interesting.
Angus, you want to? I'd feel better if you talked about the water supply part of it. I'm not quite as well up on the water supply part as you probably are.
Okay, so this was highlighted as the second primary concern the board is raising. And the first thing on the issue of water supply is there's a lack of information for us to work with. The water department had put a request out for additional information on the anticipated water supply needs of the development back in late April, and to date has not received the information it needs to conduct a thorough review. With that said, we are not at the permitting stage yet, and so the deep dive review the water department will conduct would occur at the comprehensive permit process. But even just settling on what are the usage demands, we don't have the data. So that's the first thing. But the second is we're limited under the town's Water Management Act permit to a certain volume of water that we're authorized to pump out of our watershed. And in order to supply the water needs of the proposed development based on the assumptions that the water department is making, would simply would exceed what we would be allowed to draw. So what that means is the town would have no choice but to purchase more water from Newburyport, which we do purchase water from Newburyport every year. This would drive up that amount. So that's, we wanted to make sure Mass Housing is clearly aware that the water needs of the proposal exceed those that were authorized by permit to provide. So one of the requests that's made later in the letter is that Mass Housing would require the applicant to provide the information necessary for the water department to do a more thorough review.
The final primary concern that we wanted to have Mass Housing take a look at was the yield plan. And again, I'd rather have Angus talk about that than me.
So the yield plan, this came up in a number of comments, and the planning board really did a nice job in its analysis. The application submitted by the developer to Mass Housing includes a so-called as-of-right plan or yield plan. And our review, and I say collectively between the planning board, Conservation Commission, the health agent as well, who over the years has witnessed many perk tests on this site, look at that yield plan. We're very skeptical, to say the least. And there's also appraisal that was done about 5 or 6 years ago that had its own finding based on the development potential of the site. The yield plan, we believe, is greatly overstates the underlying development potential of the property. And that's concerning for a couple of reasons. For one thing, it's indicative of a concern we have throughout the materials, or I should say in many parts of the materials the applicant submitted. There's questions as to how reliable or accurate that information is. So that's a concern. But on the yield plan specifically, if that's being represented as the underlying development potential, if that is not rebutted early, which is what we're trying to do, that could skew Mass Housing's understanding of the underlying land value. And that could flow through the development pro forma if the land is essentially overinflated or the value is overinflated. That could and would in fact have an effect on what is determined to make the project uneconomic. So it was important to make that, one of the key points is that we believe this yield plan significantly overstates what could be done on the site in the underlying zoning. And it requests that Mass Housing require the applicant to respond to those concerns in its, prior to its issuance of any determination.
Thank you, Angus. There are a lot of other topics that we have addressed in our cover letter, and certainly addressed in even more detail from individual correspondences and from the reports from town boards and committees. We obviously, just in the interest of time, can't get into all of those. If any of the people there listening have any individual concerns, again, we can't talk for hours on this, but we will certainly hear anyone's questions, or on the chat if anyone has a question of just have we addressed certain things. You're more than welcome to ask them right now. Okay.
This is Jean Lambert.
Yes.
Sorry, I had myself muted so I wouldn't interrupt you. Angus has told me that this will be made into a public, this will be a public document. Will the document you send also strongly urge Mass Housing to take a look at what the various boards and committees have given you for comments? I know that on the Open Space Committee, we spent a very long time looking at the wetlands issues and some of the other concerns from within our purview. And I know the planning board did an excellent job on all the amazingly steep slopes there. So I would hope that Mass Housing would be urged to get a complete understanding by, looking at all the documents, or at least the boards and committees. Is that possible?
I think so.
Absolutely, yeah. But we can't.
We can bring the horse to water, but we can't make them drink. I think Angus made a comment earlier how well in planning board and the open space and the other committees and commissions, how well and hard they worked on those letters. They will be highlighted definitely, but we can only, you know what I mean? We can only present it to them. We can't make them.
I understand that. I was just hoping there was a place in the letter where they could be urged to do these, because I know that the Board of Selectmen's done an amazing job getting all the comments together, and I thank you for that. But if they could be, strongly urged to consult the other documents, that might be helpful too. And hopefully all the comments that people have sent in, because the themes keep recurring. Thank you.
Yeah, so in the call that Angus and I sat in on with Mass Housing, we were told that all material would be reviewed, and we of course would lead with comments. We'll lead with a letter, but with a letter from the Board of Selectmen. But following that, will be emphasized committee comments. In front of all other comments. So, that's going to be the first thing they look at after they read the letter from the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager.
I wasn't on the call, just from my own curiosity. So, who looks at who actually is looking at this? Do you know?
Hopefully not summer interns.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Did they explain that, Rick, or no?
I believe the people who look at it are the people who we're speaking with. I mean, they're part of the team. I don't know exactly who all the people are, but I'm pretty confident that two of the people who will review this were on the phone call with us.
Rick, people might be thinking about this, or Angus. How long does the process? So when they review it, somebody might in the back of the mind. So how long is this going to take? Months, years, weeks? You know what I mean? I know it's not years, but I'm being facetious.
60 days is what they estimated, if I remember right.
I think it was 60 to 90 days, Rick. I have.
I think there's a lot of people on the line that, because people have asked me that question, and I forgot to ask that earlier. Like, even though we say it, it's hard. So it'd be good to have it tonight. So 60 to 90 days, they'll come back with some type of determination.
Yes,
our-
right. I think we should assume 30 to 60 days just to be conservative. I think, you know, what they represent, they said 60 to 90 is probably a realistic timeline, and they said it could take longer than that. But let's assume 30 to 60.
Okay, thank you.
So just so people know, just sort of like, assuming I just want to know for timeline thinking, just on the fact that they do issue an eligibility decision, that it is eligible, for example. When would we have to then contact them to get the consulting money that we are allowed from Mass Housing? And also, when would we be able to go after the money that is available from the developer? What is the time frame related to that?
So the town would be eligible to apply for a technical assistance grant from Mass Housing Partnership. And it gets a little confusing because we're talking about Mass Housing, but the Mass Housing that issues the project eligibility letter is Mass Housing Finance Agency. Mass Housing Partnership is different. They're both often referred to as Mass Housing, so that's a little confusing. So that technical assistance would be from Mass Housing Partnership, and we would not be eligible until a comprehensive permit is actually filed locally. We were in touch with that office several months ago, and we're on their list, and they've basically indicated we'll get the grant money when the time comes.
So that's not a complicated or lengthy process.
No, not at all. No, it's intended to help in particular smaller towns with limited staff. So they want to get that money to us so that we can hire a consultant, partly because.
What kind of money are we talking about so people can understand how?
$15,000. And that's.
And how far do you think that $15,000 will go?
So the $15,000, it basically you're limited to hire a consultant on the list of Mass Housing Partnership's list of pre-qualified vendors. So they've already selected vendors that are on their list. You've got to stay on the list.
Yep.
And the scope of work is going to be what Mass Housing Partnership wants it to be, which is basically someone to do some hand-holding with the Board of Appeals, to attend the hearings, to make sure that the Board of Appeals is running the hearing in a manner that's consistent with the state regulations. And part of their scope can include assistance in drafting a decision. I'm not sure that we would need that in our case because we have a good team, but but they're there basically to make sure the process is handled in accordance with regulations. A lot of it's not going to be really responsive to some of the concerns that we're hearing, and that's where Archie's other question about the other funds and what the developer puts up. And that's once a comprehensive permit's filed with the Board of Appeals, the Board of Appeals can set out what it feels it needs in order to undertake its review in accordance with its responsibilities. And so it can define the third-party reviews or peer reviews of the developer's materials that the Board of Appeals feels is necessary. And those costs are borne by the applicant, who then puts those funds in escrow. Once the funds are put in escrow, the town manages the funds. So the town then hires its own consultants to conduct whatever studies it needs, the Board of Appeals needs to do its job. So whether that's wetlands, environmental, stormwater, civil.
Yeah, but is there a ceiling on those funds?
There is not a ceiling on those funds.
So it could be $500,000.
Hypothetically,
I'm just being facetious, you know what I mean? But I mean, if the Board of Appeals comes up with a list that adds up to $500,000, it could be $500,000. If they come up with a list that it's $27,000, it could be $27,000.
that's right. Yeah, I mean, what John Witten kind of advised us, and I don't recall if this was on the session he ran with the Board of Selectmen or a separate
Yes,
one that
yes,
he ran.
he did, yes.
But he did remind us that all of those costs flow to the bottom line of the developer's pro forma. So he said, well, you can, there is, and he was explicit, there's no cap on what you can require. He cautioned that you want to ask for what you need and not do studies just for the sake of doing studies, not to say anyone would, because that is all going to come out of the development's costs. And so when you get into the later stages of determining whether certain conditions of permit may require the project uneconomic, if the applicant is carrying an additional, six-figure amount because of the peer review costs, that's all going to, at least in theory, reduce the town's ability to negotiate conditions that may make the project more palatable.
Good.
But the most important point to take away on the 53G account is that the Board of Appeals is fully empowered to require the number and type of reviews that it deems necessary to complete its review.
And they're not restricted about the list people. They could pick, they can pick whom they want.
That's correct. The developer under state statute with 53G, the only basis that an applicant can contest a consultant selection is either if the consultant is demonstrably unqualified to do the work that they're hired to do, or if the consultant has a material conflict of interest and is therefore ineligible to do the work.
Okay, I think that's good. Anyone that wants to, so the process that we're going to, the Mass Housing is going to get our comments tomorrow. Angus, where do you, we don't feel it's appropriate to put the individual comments of the residents sent in to us, because they have contact information and so forth. We don't want to put that out in the public domain, but we do intend to send them without their contact information to Mass Housing. And what other little details do we want to mention?
Well, Archie, we can, there have been requests that the correspondence be made public, and my assumption is that people would want to see those attachments. So my office can redact all of that personal identifying information.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Do you want to eat now or you want to wait a while?
So I think I'm going to piggyback on what Archie said about the little details. When he says it needs to be in by tomorrow, that's when the time clock starts, right? Because we're doing it electronically. Just for people in the wondering when the 30 to 60, it could be 90. We all understand, but when does it start? So it starts tomorrow when we send that over electronically. Is that correct? Just so people can have a good understanding.
Yes. That's correct.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy with the letter the selectmen drafted. And one thing I think that Jean Lambert, I think it was Jean who said that, it was a selectman who got all these, thank you for the hard work. I'm going to speak for myself. I didn't do any heavy lifting on this. I want to thank Angus and his staff for compiling all the, we have stacks. I have a lot of paperwork here. I'm a paper person, so the recycling people like me, but the environmental people don't. But I want to, what Jean said earlier, thank you to the selectmen for all their hard work of getting everybody's things together. I was able to just read everything and appreciate the hard work that Angus did and his staff to get everything ready for us. So quite honestly, I want to push that thank you, Gene, to Angus's staff on my behalf, not me, because it was just all provided to me. And thanks to the individuals who took the time to make their comments, because I think this is probably, since I've been a selectman, more interaction. It was not actually nice to see somebody I didn't agree with, but that doesn't matter. I agreed with most of them. It was nice to see individuals get involved, because sometimes when we have these meetings and then when we go take a vote, they said, why haven't you guys told us about this? And we've had like 7 meetings. So thank you for all the people that, got involved in this process. And thank you to Angus's staff for putting everything together.
Ditto. So, thank you all, and if there are no further questions, we'll go on to our next agenda item. So, as
Archie, if I just speak to, just so people have that expectation of timing. So we'll be sending this to Mass Housing by close of business tomorrow. And it's pretty quick to post things to the website. So if it doesn't get posted by the end of tomorrow, it can definitely get posted on Wednesday. So, by the end of the day on Wednesday, everything should be up on that project webpage.
okay. Okay, now we are going to talk about perhaps changing some aspects of the annual and special town meeting scheduled for Saturday, June 27th. So what do we want to talk about first? Do we want to talk about the quorum? First off, the legislature has passed and the governor has signed very recently legislation allowing towns of our size with open town meetings to reduce the quorums of town meeting for the specific purpose of allowing greater social distancing, smaller meeting size, to reduce the chances of spreading COVID-19. So that's the background to it. The details of it actually are that the legislation allows the quorums to be reduced to as little as 10% of the existing quorum. So in our case, that would lower the quorum from 90 people on large items that require a 90-person quorum down to 9 people. And just personally speaking, I don't want it to be a 9-person thing. I think perhaps we may want to reduce the quorum, but I certainly don't want to go there. So that's where that's the background to it, and I'll let Casey speak to it further.
Well, first, I'd like to say that just because you can reduce the quorum to only 10% of the existing quorum doesn't mean that that's the only reduction you can make.
Right.
You can make it up to that. So you could make it half, or you could make it 3/4 or whatever. It doesn't have to be 9 people. Because our meeting is on June 27th and the end of the fiscal year is on June 30th, and we don't have any idea how many people will be attending the town meeting, I think it's wise to lower the quorum to maybe 40, which is our quorum if we don't have big money items, just to be on the safe side. That does not mean that we're going to throw people out because there are already 40 people there. Everyone who wishes to attend the meeting and is a voter can come. And there was actually a news item this morning on the radio that the meetings that have already been held under these unusual circumstances have had larger than usual attendance. So people seem to be interested in how we're going to handle all this, I guess, is what the problem is. So anyway, the chances are we won't have that problem. But if we do, then you have no budget.
A fail-safe.
So this is just a way to make sure that we can have the meeting. I think I would be amazed if we didn't have at least 40 or 50 people there. And we will probably have more than 90. But this is just a way to sort of ensure that we can have the meeting, get the budget passed, get the important financial items passed, and keep the town running.
I agree with Casey.
Yeah, one point I'd like to make is that because the statute required a 7-day notice before the board can vote, you really have to make your determination at your next meeting, because the notices were posted last week. So this will be on the agenda a week from now, and that's the time that you can make a decision. Obviously, obviously you could talk about it now, but you're going to have to talk about it again next week.
Yeah, I think that was our intention, was to send the notice out, have a good discussion tonight about it, but then so we have plenty of time to discuss it and answer questions if there were any, and then make the final decision next week. That's what I think that was the plan.
Or maybe Mike is the right person to answer this. Is if we reduce, say, to 40 people, which would be a lower threshold for. I'm not. I think that there's a dollar limit beyond which we can't go.
Correct.
What is that limit? And is that threshold at 40 people? So if we have 40 people, are we then not limited in dollar amounts, or is there some limitation?
No. The rule is that for the annual town meeting you need 90 for everything at the annual town meeting. For a special town meeting, you need 40 for expenditures $20,000 or less. But if you have an expenditure over 20,000, you need a 90 quorum for a special town meeting. So effectively, because we have the annual on, the quorum right now is 90.
With no money, it's just basic. Annual town meeting is whatever's on the annual town meeting. We need a quorum of 90. There are no differentiations about money, only on the special, Rick. And that's when we have those. That's what we have those thresholds.
So my question is, if we reduce the quorum to 40 people, as Casey suggested, is a possible number. Is there a limitation then to no article greater than $20,000?
No.
No. Or is allowing us to do
or
flexibility.
Anything fair game.
Anything at 40.
Yeah, no. Yeah, he's
By-
flexibility.
This is a
I'm
one-time-
sorry, Archie. Cut out.
My understanding is this is a one-time deal because of COVID-19, that the state has allowed the boards of selectmen of the towns of open town meetings to lower the quorum so that they can have the town meeting. Now, I have not seen anything that directly addresses the question, which is a good question, Rick, because we have a bylaw that says that we have to have a quorum of 90 for anything over $20,000, and that is in our bylaws. That's not in the state statutes, and I have not seen that particular question addressed. I will look into it before next week so that I can answer the question, but I don't really know that if the state legislation that enables this reduction of quorum then supersedes any town bylaws.
Hey,
It does. It does.
It does?
If
It
it's
does. That's the point.
superseding
Is
it
that
in one part, it can't then say, well, you still have to have 90 for the rest of this. It wouldn't make sense.
no? What you
Yeah, but
what-
but an annual town meeting is different from a special town meeting. Just because you're having an annual town meeting in the spring doesn't mean that towns have special town meetings. They do, but they don't have to. Have them at the same time.
The legislation says any town meeting.
Okay,
So
there you
that
go.
includes annual and specials. You will literally have to take 3 votes next week. One is to address the quorum for the annual, and the second would be to address the quorum for the first special, and the third would be the quorum for the second special. So there'd be 3 separate decisions of the board as to the quorum requirements for the upcoming town meetings.
So I would take a case, because we've talked about this forever. So, but I would take Casey's recommendation, and being that bring it down to 40. We can't bring it down to 9. I don't agree with that. Bring it down to 40. But Casey it's a game time decision. She's not going to start it with 40. In her mind, she wants as many people as there as possible, and with the most representation. So if we have that in our head, but have it in our back pocket that we can still do town business only with 40, that's the best of both worlds.
I agree with that. I do not think that we are going to have a problem. I really don't. I think that people will come. And there's one town, and it's a big town, Concord, I think, has no quorum. And they had a record turnout at their meeting. So, it's kind of an interesting dynamic, what's going on with all
Yeah,
of this.
and I think people want to get out, and I think people are going to be interested in what this is all about too. It's not going to be a boring, not that you're boring, Casey, a boring town meeting in the annex.
Yeah, no, I think people will come to the meeting. It concerns everybody that, and all of the moderators have discussed this, that the attendance at town meetings is skewed toward older people. And it is in all the towns, and it is in West Newbury. I mean, we do have more senior citizens than really young people in general showing up at our town meetings. And of course, the senior citizens are the ones who are in a high-risk group. So if the senior citizens feel like they shouldn't come because they're in a high-risk group, then we could have a problem with the quorum. And that's what I'm concerned about. I think that we will probably have a good turnout. We'll probably exceed the quorum. But on the off chance that, exercising caution, people decide not to come, this gives us the ability to have the meeting.
I'm just throwing this out. Casey, do you think before the meeting, I was thinking more like 50 or 60. So do you think 40 is too low?
There's nothing sacred about 40. That's just the other number that's in our bylaw, which for a special town meeting with no item over $20,000, we could have the meeting with 40. So it's something that people might be familiar with. No, a 50 would be fine with me. I just think we need some lower number to ensure that we can have the meeting.
I was thinking 50 people before, but after listening to what Casey said and just realizing that there's already precedent for 40 being a quorum for a town meeting, obviously that's for a special town meeting, not the annual town meeting. I don't know, 40 seems like a reasonable number. I think we're going to have way more than that. I think we're going to beat 90 people. I think people are going to find it a novelty to go to an outdoor town meeting on a Saturday. Now, I've been wrong before, and I may be wrong again, but I don't know. I think the number 40 was a reasonable number. We have a precedent.
Okay, I can live with that. So so that we're all on agreement, so that we don't have to redo this talking again next week. Let's say we're all good with 40 for each of the 3 meetings.
I'm totally in agreement. With the understanding that we're not going to start the meeting at 40, Casey, this is just a start, this is a safety net to get done with town meeting.
Yeah, that's a
Glenn, I
great
think
way to look at it.
you called the meeting for 10, you being the
Yep.
Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
And there has been grumbling in the past when we used to have trouble getting a quorum occasionally, that the meeting didn't happen. I'll be asking people to please come early because registration thing could take a little bit longer because of the lines and social distancing and everything in the seating. So I'm hoping people will come a little earlier than 10. But I believe by 10, we will know whether we're going to really be in trouble with the quorum or whether people are, and we're just going to have a normal meeting. If there aren't 40 people there at 10, obviously we can't open the meeting. But if there are 40 people there and there are clearly more people coming, then we can open the meeting. Now, the problem with that is the very first thing we're going to take up is the line item budget from the annual town meeting. And that's something that most people are interested in, at least the regular town meeting attendees are interested in the line item budget. So I really would, everybody to get there a little early, get meeting, all that kind of stuff, so that by 10 o'clock, we're clear on, okay, this is going to go. I just froze.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. I
Sounds
think
well thought out to me, Casey.
So Mike, where do we have to, what kind of public notice do we have to put? Do we have to, is this
It's
a new thing?
It's already done. The notice has been, what was it? The Department of Revenue, the DLS has given us advice as to what we should do. And what we did is we posted it on the website, we posted it on our town Facebook account, we posted it with the town warrants last week, Brian, to the places there, and we posted it in the open meeting section. So we've complied with the notice that of your consideration to lower it, and your decision has to be made on next Monday. Once you do that, then I send a notification to the Attorney General that you have lowered the quorum for these town meetings. I'll prepare a vote for you all to basically sign for next week.
And it's important for people to understand that the bar cart and the food cart is going to stop serving at 10. So you want to get there earlier for that and get seated.
The Bloody Mary, make your
Yeah.
own.
That's right. Yeah, the shrimp and bacon Bloody Mary cart will stop serving at 10 o'clock. So you need to get in your seats.
Get there early.
That's right.
Okay, great.
Hey, Archie, while we're on this topic, I think this would be a good opportunity to talk about this idea of a pre-town meeting kind of online forum. I know the board's
Okay.
that Casey has recommended that as well. I think we all think that's a great idea. So
Say that again?
having a virtual meeting prior to town meeting to give people a forum to ask questions about the budget or about articles to try
Okay,
to.
I got that.
Yeah.
Hey, Casey,
So,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there any provisions of trying to streamline registration? We can't do that beforehand, obviously, right? And these are all rhetorical questions, but I just want to ask them because people have asked.
Well,
We can't pre-register beforehand and get a number at town hall, so that day it's a lot easier.
Well,
No.
I mean, we could have talked about that a month ago, but this is a little too close to the meeting to start thinking about doing something quite that different. But Mike has the new registration thing. And we have 3 entries planned at the venue. So that people can go to any one of the 3 entries, because you don't have to register now by where you live on. You just go up and register. And it really, that has already streamlined things.
It really has.
Uh,
Okay, I don't want to take up a lot of time. Somebody just asked me that, so that's it.
but,
So,
I
sorry to
think
bring something new into it.
And it shouldn't be. You're gonna
Okay,
need
thank you.
to get some volunteers, maybe some of the high school kids or something.
Yep.
Ushers.
Hey, it might be helpful too to tell everybody when we're going to start, because are we going to start at 8 o'clock registering people?
You're starting, to let people in? Oh, yeah, would be good. You're right. I don't know. When will the times be?
Mike, what would you think?
I think you could.
We don't have to do that.
Obviously,
We might
I
wanna
can
tell
have 2
people.
registrars there, and have them there, say 9 o'clock. With the iPads, obviously registration is quick. You don't have to line up. You don't have to line up by your street. You can go to either one. We're going to have 2 separate tables so that there's more social distancing, and voters will be able to go to either one. And it's very quick, and we'll be able to get people in and registered right away.
Hey, Mike, I'm sure this is something you've already thought about, but they're using iPads. Do they require Wi-Fi, or is there going to be
No,
Wi-Fi?
they do not require Wi-Fi,
Okay.
to operate. They do use Wi-Fi to download the materials afterwards, but they won't. They can operate independently,
Okay, but they're not. Okay.
and they talk to each other. They talk to each other.
They
They're
do talk to each
Bluetooth
other.
connected.
Okay. 'Cause
so
I know-
that I know that when they are like they will keep a count on both of them. So you could ask either one of them, what's the total number of people put in, and they will sync with the other iPad.
Okay, so they know who's already checked in.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. I mean, they know who's checked in on the other iPad. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to having the sort of voter information, pre-town meeting.
So I was able to get confirmation earlier today that the FinCom is happy to be represented, the Board of Selectmen as well, and myself, Mike McCarron, and Casey were all available next Tuesday evening, June 23rd. So while we haven't formalized or announced that, I think that's going to be the evening. That'll be the date. So we're going to look to pin down a time tomorrow, and we're going to try to heavily promote that. It's only a week away. So we're going to want to get the word out as broadly as we can that'll take place, and that'll be intended as an open forum for people to ask whatever questions they may have about the articles or the proposed operating budget.
So anybody that has a specific question, for example, about the bandstand line item, ask it Tuesday night. Don't ask it at the town meeting.
Correct. One of the problems with organizing these outdoor town meetings is that, and you'll remember this from when we're in the annex, someone asks a question, then we've got to find someone who's going to answer that question. Then we've got to move microphones around to the end. And we don't have the luxury of doing all that in the field. So it would really slow things down considerably and increase the contact between people. So the idea is to have everyone who has questions about anything to be able to ask them up front so that we can get those taken care of. Now, at the meeting itself, what some moderators have done, and I think that this is wise, is the microphones are available for people who want to make a statement, debate, discuss the article, but they're not available for questions, if you just want some information. And so what they've done is had, runners who, you have to write your question down on a piece of paper and submit it to the moderator. So there's none of this going back and forth to the microphone 3 times because you have a question about something. And so we can do that. We can hope that people will attend the open forum, ask as many questions as they can. We can also provide email addresses or phone numbers or whatever. If you didn't make it to the meeting, but you have a question, please call this person or whatever. But the idea is to minimize the number of people who just have an informational question to ask. This isn't people who want to make their statement by saying, well, I have a question, and then it's, Perry Mason. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who really want information and need to get it before they know how they want to vote. And so I think this pre-town meeting forum is very important to try to clear up any kinds of questions people have. And then I hope somehow we can post the questions and answers on the website or whatever, so that other people who didn't attend can see what the answers were, and try to minimize this kind of informational aspect of the meeting.
I think it's a great idea, Casey, but how do we keep it to question and answer and not opinion? So maybe it
That's
should
my
be
job.
more. But maybe the selectmen shouldn't be part of it. It more should be you, Angus, and Mike, just answering questions. They have all the backup material from the commissions and the board of, from the department heads and stuff like that. I mean, we can listen in, but to try to keep it really streamlined, more of an informational thing and not opinion.
Right.
I don't know. That's just a suggestion. I'm not.
Well, I hope that you and the other selectmen sort of monitor yourselves, because I know you have opinions on these things, and so do I. But you just, this is not.
Have you listened to me? Maybe I might not. Maybe I'll be busy that night. Have you listened to me over the last 15 years? It's hard for me not to speak. So maybe I'll be busy that night.
I also told you that you're out of order over the years, so that's okay. But
my wife wants to know how to get me to shut up that quick.
we'll talk. No, I think the 3 of you are completely capable of limiting your answers to informational answers and not expounding on your opinion about it. I don't have a problem with that.
Casey, we're going to have probably some new people related to the 40B that have never been to town meeting before. At this Tuesday night sort of training session, is there something you could, is there a little 3 or 4 minute spiel you could give to people so that they would know what is going on, so you don't have to give it at the actual town meeting?
Sure, I will put something together. I think that is a good point, Archie, because there are lots of people that are interested in the second special town meeting who either have not ever been to a town meeting before, or very seldom, and really do not understand how town meeting works at all, or the whole process. So I will put together a little introductory talk about how town meeting works. The other thing is that if people really don't understand town meeting and they're going to be there because they have a really strong interest in this 40B project, they're free to call me anytime and get more information about how town meeting works, because that is the key to having this thing move smoothly, that people understand that this is not a debate, this is not an open forum, this is the legislative branch of the government, and there are ways that we conduct our business, and that's the way it's got to be.
Hey,
So,
Casey, when you put that thing together, what about sending it to the people who passed around that petition? They must have an email list obviously. And then they could kind of like send it out to the people that would be interested on the 40B. I mean, 350 something people signed it. You know, they must have an email list of 100 or so. Send it to that key person, and then they can disseminate that throughout their channels. And if somebody has any questions, give you a call.
Yep, I think that's fine. I will.
So,
I'll get it together as soon as I can, and I will send it to the appropriate people. I will send it to Angus for, feedback, obviously. And then to the appropriate person who's sort of organizing the 40B contingent there. And but still, Glenn, I mean, I think this is a really good point you're making. Town meeting is just this rather strange kind of government that we have here, that a lot of people who haven't grown up with it, and of which I'm one, but a lot of people who haven't grown up with it and have not participated over the years really don't understand how important it is, that it really is the legislative branch of the government, and it has rules, and there's ways that things have to be done. And I'm not trying to be mean or heavy-handed or whatever, but this is the way it has to be done. And
I would agree. And people who have grown up like I did in Burlington, who had town meeting form of government, but has representative form of government. So they can say, oh no, I grew up in town meeting government, but they never attended one town meeting because I was a representative for my neighborhood when I was a kid. You know what I mean? So they really don't know. Oh no, I know town meeting because I grew up in it, but they really don't because they were in a representative town meeting format, and they never went to a town meeting because somebody represented them.
Well, and another problem that we have is that when we have an election year, the press presents all these things as town meetings where the candidates go and they address a bunch of people in some little town, and this is the town meeting. No, that's a speech, but
Yeah. They're using it as generic rather than the specific.
That's not what town meeting really is. So, we have problems, but we'll get through it. Don't worry about it. I mean, there have been people over the years who started out thinking that this was just such a terrible thing to do and have become real aficionados of town meetings. So, it's just you're getting used to the idea, understanding what's going on, but yeah.
Okay, that's good.
can we talk just a second about sort of how the Tuesday meeting next week is going to be run? Because, if there's 15 people, it's one thing. If there's 150 people, it's something totally different. And so how do we keep it from being, some variation on the Tower of Babel?
Well, I mean, I'm going to assume that Angus is going to be the host, and it's up to the host how to recognize people. So we had my church had a Zoom annual meeting where there were probably 120 people, and they were, it's like a town meeting. It's same thing. You've got a warrant and articles, and how much money we're going to spend on whatever. And they did a really good job. The moderator, in the beginning, everybody's muted. You can't unmute without permission of the moderator, but the moderator can, recognize people, and can actually see an order in which they ask to be recognized on the chat page. So I'm more familiar with Zoom than I am with GoToMeeting, but I'm going to assume that the same functionality is available, that you can, initially mute everybody and then recognize people to speak. So they're not all trying to speak at once, but they can get their questions answered.
Why don't we, what about start the meeting, and all of us or whomever, Angus and everybody, come up with like all the questions that what the heck am I trying to say? All the regular questions, you know what I mean? The basic questions about a town meeting. Maybe there could be 20 of them. And Casey, you answer them like in 2 or 3 words. Say, this is almost go through the whole thing. So that might answer a bunch of people. You know what I mean? Answer a bunch of questions already ahead of time that somebody might have. That's it. Just say, hey, it's going to be this. It's going to be on Saturday. We're going to start checking in at this time. Or, you have to be a registered voter. You have to, all those type of things. And then just go through some basic generic questions that you have been asked 1 billion times. And you wonder why we're all still asking them. And then open up for question. And I bet you might not have many on the town meeting part. And then the articles, we would do it.
One thing I have done, Glenn, is just this morning, I sent a draft of a letter that I want to send to the whole town, to Angus, for his input and to get input from anybody else, that sort of describes what's going on. There's still some holes in it because I was waiting for some information about certain things, but it's basically put together, and it's exactly what you just said. It's an explanation of this town meeting because it's a strange town meeting, but it's an explanation of what we're planning to do for this town meeting, how things are going to run, who's expected to do what, sanitation. I'm trying to address the issues that people might have about just the meeting logistics, not the warrant or the or the line item budget, but just the logistics of the meeting. And that letter should go out before we have this meeting because it encourages people to read the warrant, to read the line item budget carefully. And if you have questions, informational questions, not discussion, but questions about any of these items on the warrant or on the line item budget, there will be this informational session because we're trying to dispense with as many questions as we can before we actually get to the meeting to avoid these trips to the microphone by the question asker and the potential question answerer. So to a certain extent,
You might even have some.
Hmm?
Sorry, I thought you finished.
That's okay. Go ahead.
You might even have questions from people who have never missed a town meeting in the 30 years they've been here, and sitting in the audience and go, "Oh, whoa, why are you doing it different this time? I was able always to do this." You know what I mean? So you might want to address that. Say, "Hey, this is the reason why we're doing it different. This is, we're trying to get as much input as we possibly can, but these are the reasons why we're doing it different just this year." And because if they don't understand, then they'll never understand. But you might even have we're always worried about the people who haven't shown up, but you know what I mean? Having questions. What about the people who have come every year and go, whoa, this isn't the way we do it.
Well, Glenn, you can only do so much.
I agree, but whatever. I think we've overthought this too much.
New comes up
I get it.
and I just have to deal with it. That's the nature of the job. It's like, well, okay. I wasn't expecting this, but here we go. So.
The answer is because that's what we decided.
But you're right. When I give my little spiel at the beginning of the meeting, hoping some people will come, I can make those points. There are questions about budget and whatever, but there are also questions just about the meeting and how are we going to handle this thing. So all of us, I hope, can answer questions about both the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about, the warrant, the line item budget, whatever, but also about this strange meeting that we're having that's different from anything we've ever done before. But I really believe if we engage the community in the whole thing, they'll help us. So I'm very optimistic.
Okay, we good?
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Casey.
You're welcome.
Hold on. We're good in the sense of what's going to be, we've discussed this now ad nauseum. So we don't have to have this, a rediscussion, just a vote. Mike's going to come up with the proper thing. So what will be the vote next week? That we're going to bring everything down just to 40? And that's,
I
okay.
think, Glenn, you were, yeah, we already decided you're
Sorry.
cut off at that point.
Yeah, okay, good. Yep, so I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure so we don't have to rediscuss it. Okay, sorry,
Right.
thanks.
No talking next week. Okay. Final item is, we have a request by the contractor painting the Break Hill water tank, the new tank, to work on forthcoming Saturdays in the summer. Angus, do you know that why is this request being made? That's the question, I guess.
I believe it is to keep the project on track time-wise. I think they've been moving along very well, but I think there was some time lost because of COVID. And so they're looking to do painting work on Saturday. There wouldn't be any equipment, so it would be, we think it wouldn't cause any noise or anything, but obviously neighbors would see people working back there, so we would want to let them know ahead of time. If the board does authorize this, my office would send a letter out to the neighborhood to let them know that that they could expect painting work for the water tank on Saturdays.
This won't save us any money?
I honestly, I don't think so, but I don't know. I'm not dealing directly with the contractor. It's going through the water department.
And will there be any time restrictions?
That would be whatever restrictions the board puts on there.
I have to think about
Them
this.
out there too
Certainly don't-
early.
Glenn, the other one says that people can, the routine, the Monday through Friday says people can start at 6:45. I would absolutely not be in favor of that on a Saturday.
9 to 5 would be my thing on a Saturday. If somebody wants to enjoy something, I don't know, people coming in, coming out, in the morning, they want to sleep in. I don't know what's going to go up there. All I know is I don't know, but I have no problem 9, and then they have to be out by 5. That's just whatever. And if they want to push back on that, then they can give us a detailed explanation of exactly what's going to be happening and why they need to be pushed.
Contractors always say there'll be no noise and no equipment.
And there's always noise.
And come on.
So is that reasonable, you think, 9 to 5? I mean, I don't know. I just threw that out. I mean, if they were across the street from me, I thought on a Saturdays, 9 to 5 is reasonable.
That's
Yeah.
what I think.
They won't be across the street from anybody, right? I mean, they'll be up on, up by the water tank, so there'll be a couple of 100 yards or more.
But they still have to bring the pickups and all that stuff. Yeah.
If any equipment needs to be moved into the site, I would ask that to be moved in on the weekdays and not
Well,
on.
yeah, I think that's reasonable, but to me, if you limit them to 9 to 5, I mean, I don't know, but does that then impact what they're going to actually be able to accomplish? You're trying to get the job done, and I'm not trying to infringe upon the neighbors, but I'm.
Yeah, but you know what? Hey, we're giving them something. They have to give us something.
Yeah.
That's my
We're giving them a break.
Yeah, because they probably, quite honestly, COVID came along, and I was waiting for Angus to say that, but I bet you $15 this request was going to come no matter what. They always seem to do over the years. We think about the neighbors, we think about the neighborhood, we put time restrictions on it, and it always comes back at the end, and they know it's going to happen. Oh, we have to keep on budget, we have to do this, we don't want cost overruns. Martians, invaded the earth. We need to work on Saturdays and Sundays. You know what I mean? It's just whatever. I like to, whatever.
No, you're right.
Not whatever. 9 to 5, because this was coming no matter if COVID was here or not. Quite honestly, it always is. I would be surprised if it did.
Discussion?
I prefer to see it, give them a little bit more slack, quite honestly. I don't know.
Do you know something we don't know, Rick? And I'm not saying that you're hiding something from us.
No, I don't at all. I
Okay,
just,
and that wasn't, I didn't mean that to seem like you were hiding something. I just want to make sure that I'm versed on it as well as you know what I mean?
I'm just, I think it's in everybody's best interest for the job to get completed as soon as possible. And so, and I don't know what their threshold is, in terms of what point does it just not make sense?
Can we, what about this, Rick? What about this? Why don't we bring that back to them? Obviously, that's 8 hours more than they had before on Saturdays, and see what they say. And then give us specific reasons
Sure.
why
Well,
it won't work.
Glenn,
they ask for-
Glenn, I don't see any reason to that, because if I'm not going earlier, I'll vote no.
Okay, me too. I was just trying to be a good selectman and listen to Rick. So no, I'm not. I'm not doing it either. Because 9 to 5 is going to turn into 8 to 6. Trust me.
Right.
Okay. You seconded it, Archie. You want to call it?
All in favor? Aye.
Anything else?
Yeah, if I could clarify. So as you saw from the materials in the packet, the contractor had asked to start this Saturday, the 20th. Mike Goutet had wisely advised them that it might be that they couldn't start till the 27th because we do want to give people a letter. I would suggest that the board's motion begin with the 27th. That way that gives us a little more time to make sure a letter gets into people's hands before they start seeing Saturday work.
And then they can't yell at us at town meeting.
Whatever.
Okay.
So that would be, just for the public listening, that would be, the request has been for June 27th, July 11th, July 18th, and July 25th.
Okay.
From 9 to 5.
Sounds good. Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Kepper, aye. Good night. Good night, everybody. Good meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.